Hello, students. Welcome to week 2 for rhetorical criticism and contemporary culture. This week we are looking at Neo-Aristotelianism criticism. To look at the week 2 agenda, we are reading chapter 3, which deals with the works of Aristotle and the genesis of classical rhetorical criticism. And we are also watching some videos on the history of rhetoric as well as Aristotle's perspectives of rhetoric, including a discussion board that's due on Friday with reply posts due on Sunday, and our article review number 2. To clarify some things with article review number 2, I know a number of you have emailed me asking me questions. The idea behind this is for you to spend time in the works and the ideas of rhetorical criticisms. So I want you in there reading some of these works. You can do a classic search through the CBU library for any place you would find a journal article or a scholarly article. You can use that. And so what I want you to do is spend some time looking through some journal articles that pertain to rhetoric or utilize rhetoric or a rhetorical critique of some sort. If you're confused about what that is, please look at the first couple chapters of the text. And I want you to read that article, and then essentially there are some things you need to do. There's 3 steps listed here that you need to do, but essentially what I'm looking for you to do is to choose an article that's a rhetorical criticism and review it. That's it. I'm looking for you to provide a reflection and analysis of how the writers wrote the paper and how it pertains to what your knowledge is this week in learning the materials for the course. So in that, you'll provide an overview to me of the journal article and the research you found. You'll analyze it and look at it from its strengths and weaknesses, and then you'll provide some comment on how this research study contributes to the area of rhetorical studies and criticisms. For some of you that have had courses with me before and we've had article reviews in those courses, this is the same thing. This time we're just utilizing and pertaining it to the ideas of rhetorical criticisms or rhetoric, any idea related to that. So just keep that in mind. And if you have any questions, reach out. Do know if you're having trouble finding any essays or anything like that, there are many research studies or rhetorical papers that are found at the end of each chapter. You can utilize any of those as well. Discussion board number 2 asks you to read the speech at the end of chapter 3 that's on the Vietnamization speech by Richard Nixon. After you're done with that, provide a brief summarization of the speech and describe and explain how the speech uses rhetorical strategies as well as analysis and explanation of the use of Neo-Aristotelian criticism. And then, of course, reply to 2 other people and all of that good stuff that we do with our participatory aspects of the course within the discussions. It's important to know that rhetoric is the purposive use of messages to invite assent. Rhetoric is really defined by its function, not as a communication medium, topic, or social location. Rhetoric always functions. It's not announced, it's not acknowledged, and it's used by those who deny it and defame it. We all use it. Rhetoric is typically tracked and looked at through linear communication or transmission communication if we're looking at the views of communication. It's not necessarily ritualistic. This means that all communication takes place along a line and can be tracked from a source, message, and receiver. So in rhetoric or utilizing rhetorical ideas within our communication, we can clearly find a source, a message they intend it to be, and a receiver that it's intended for. Remember, ritualistic communication is not about the impartations of messages to send from a receiver to and fro, but about the ritual of communing with one another. Rhetoric doesn't necessarily follow along those lines. We're a little more specific in what the purpose is of the communication, and we're analyzing the persuasive nature of that communication. Please keep in mind that rhetoric is rooted in persuasive communication. We're looking at the persuasive ideas and the persuasive nature of what we are communicating. With that, we can look at things like reasoned action theory. Reasoned action theory is commonly used in persuasive communication and within rhetorical criticisms, critiques, rhetorical writing, speeches, whatever it may be that's related to rhetoric. Remember, reasoned action is explicitly concerned with behavior. So this theory also recognizes that there are situations or factors that limit the influence of attitude on behavior, and the theory relies on 4 main concepts: beliefs, attitudes, intention, and behavior. What we can do is we can plug in any idea and know that if we have a belief, we can shape the attitude and the intention of the behavior from that. So in this graphic here, you can see that we have a beliefs about the outcome of a behavior. So if I exercise, I will improve my health, lose some weight, so on and so forth. My attitude towards that specific behavior is exercise would be a good thing for me. My behavioral intention is I'm going to start an exercise program, and the actual behavior change is exercising. So reasoned action theory can track behavior change from the beginning thoughts or the influence of beginning communication related to that idea all the way up until when the change occurs. So just keep that in mind. Looking at some works on Aristotle and his ideas of classic rhetorical criticism, there's 12 items here that we really look at when we are looking at a rhetorical critique from an Aristotelian perspective. We're looking at the speaker's personality, the character of how they spoke, the audience, major ideas, motives, nature of the speaker's proof, speaker's judgment, mode of expression, arrangement, speech preparation, delivery, the effect the discourse has on the audience. But it's really important to know that the first formal method of rhetorical criticism development in the communication field is called neoclassic or neo-Aristotelian, or a traditional method of criticism. In 1925, Herbert Wilchins detailed a central feature of this method in his book, The Literary Criticism Oratory. Really, critics did not use specific guidelines for criticisms up until this point, and there was no clear understanding of what rhetorical criticism was before this. Really, this essay began, and the historical roots of rhetoric began distinguishing literary criticism from rhetorical criticism, asserting that rhetorical criticism is not concerned with permanence nor yet beauty, as literary criticism is. Rather, it's concerned with effects. It regards a speech as communication to a specific audience and holds its business to be the analysis and appreciation of the orator's method of imparting his ideas to his hearers. Really, it reflects on the origins of the communication discipline, and departments of English and such come from the ideas of rhetoric. Early theorists in communication wanted to develop a field that was separate and a legitimate discipline. Rhetoric provided the means to do that. The major contribution to this idea of classical rhetoric and such was that it's listed in the topics that should be covered within speech. So it should deal with the elements of the speaker's personality, the public character of the speaker's perception, and such. It's really important to know that this idea of rhetoric really comes into play with how we look at communication artifacts, any piece of communication, and what it's persuasive to our culture, and how the context of cultures that were different in terms of values and orientation and such look at criticism that is assumed to believe ideally rhetorical in terms of the cultures that we live in today. It's really important to know that when we select an artifact, we have to do three things. According to neoclassical criticism, a critic analyzes an artifact in a four-step process. Pages 24, it begins on page 24 in the text, and it provides you with some really clear ideas. Essentially, you have to select an artifact, then analyze the artifact, formulate a research question, and then write the essay. It's really important to keep that in mind when you are looking at it from that perspective. As you craft your pieces and we move towards writing our own rhetorical criticisms, as you read through articles and such, and like your article review number 2, it provides you with the opportunity to see how the structure and information provided within those scholarly published articles help you have an understanding of what you should be working towards when we get to that point. Remember, the weekly agenda for this week tells us we're reading chapter 3. We're watching 2 videos on rhetoric, as well as discussion number 2 and article review number 2. If you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to working with you this week. God bless.